Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to talk about some middle grade stories that I really want to read. Unfortunately, due to life circumstances and just busyness, I have not gotten to participate in middle grade March, and because of an upcoming podcast book, I was inspired to create a middle grade TBR for myself to kind of remind myself that I do enjoy middle grade and I need to put it on my TBR more often. Just because I've already mentioned it, I am going to do a little bit of a shameless plug and talk about the podcast. If you guys are not aware, I am in a podcast called Not Reading for Content along with Leandra from Leandra the TBR Zero. It's a monthly book club podcast where we talk about books, and each episode features 1/3 of the book, and then we always do a hype episode at the beginning where we read through the synopsis and talk about what our thoughts going into the book are before we've even read any of it. We have an episode posted every Friday on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and also on Spotify. So join us in any of those locations if you guys are interested in reading along with us. The book that we will be reading in the month of May is Inkheart, which is a middle grade fantasy. And I'm not going to tell you what it's about here because I don't want to know before the hype episode. So you'll have to join us on the podcast if you would like to read Inkheart along with us. We would love to have you there. What I am going to talk about today is 15 middle grade books that I am excited to get to, one of which I have talked about on a recent video. It was my anticipated releases video. I talked about the book Where There Be Monsters, which I am really excited to get to. I think this comes out in April, and this book features a young girl. I can't remember how old she is, but her family runs an inn, and this inn is one of kind of the safe havens along what's called the Seam, which is a monster-ridden land, which I already love. If you've watched any of my recent videos, you know I've been kind of in a monster jam mood, and so I'm excited to see a middle grade have some monsters in it. And our main character really just wants to become a spironaut, I think is what it's called, which I'm assuming is some type of an astronaut. It does talk about traveling through space and time. She wants to follow in her mother's footsteps, but obviously there's also her family inn that she has to consider, and she gets an opportunity to, I don't know if she runs away or if she tells people that she's going. I'm not sure. I'll have to read the book to find out. But she actually gets the opportunity to go and become a spironaut and explore the vast areas of the universe, which you would think would also be in the Seam because the Seam is where the monsters are. But it talks about how she goes into an area that has a lot of darkness lurking. So I'm curious to see where this goes. I also have some recommendations from you all in this list because on my sprints on Sunday, I was chatting about Inkheart and kind of preparing for the podcast, and then realizing that I haven't picked up a middle grade in a while and was asking you guys for some of your recommendations. So I wrote them down and I'm throwing them in this video, but I am going to give credit where credit is due. The first two were recommended to me by Tennille, and Tennille and I have some similar reading tastes, and so I am excited to get to these because they sound really cute. The first one is called Spell Sweeper, and I really like this concept. So this girl is at a magical school, and I don't think she's very good at, you know, like the typical education. I think the start of this says that she fails out of some of her tests that she has to take. And one of the things that she is responsible for in the school is cleaning up the remnants of magic. So hence the Spell Sweeper. And I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go from that. I assume there's going to be some type of an issue with how much magical dust or, you know, dirt is lying around that our main character has to deal with. I like this concept. It's a similar concept to The Maid and the Crocodile, except for obviously that was an adult novel, but one of the characters there was called a Curse Eater, and she literally would clean up the magical dust. I think they called it silt in that book, if I remember correctly. But everyone would, as you walk around, just like, you know, we leave dust everywhere as we walk around in a microscopic viewpoint. But you also leave like magical dust as well. And so I don't know if it's going to be anywhere similar to that, but I do like the concept. So I'm excited about this one. The next one Tennille recommended was called Cinders and Sparrows. And I love the start of this synopsis, and it just got me. So this says, when a scarecrow climbs over the garden wall delivering 12-year-old orphan Zeta a letter saying that she's inherited distant castle, she jumps at the chance for an adventure. I mean, a sentient scarecrow? Yep, sign me up. But then it says, but little does she know that she's about to be thrust into a centuries-old battle between good and evil. Blackbird Castle was once home to a powerful dynasty of witches. All of them are now dead under mysterious circumstances. Zeta is the last of her line, and Zeta, unfortunately, doesn't know the first thing about being a witch. I think it sounds fantastic, and I'm excited to get to it. Next, I had a recommendation from Kirsten over at the Reading Nymph, and this was Into the Wild. And this is the Cat Warrior, or the Warriors series. So I have heard of this, but I've never actually read any of them. And I don't know, and I don't really want to read into the synopsis of these. I know it has to deal with clans of warrior cats and them kind of all living in a kingdom together and having to coexist. But anything about cute cats has to be amazing. So I'm excited to finally pick up this classic. Next, I had Anne recommend me The Colossus Rises from the Seven Wonders series. And this synopsis says, one boy, Jack McKinley, is an ordinary kid with an extraordinary problem. In a few months, he's going to die. This says, one mission, Jack needs to find 7 locally that, when combined, have the power to cure him. One problem, the locally are relics of a lost civilization that haven't been seen for thousands of years. 7 wonders, because they are hidden in the 7 wonders of the ancient world. I'm all about like an ancient world that we have to explore, lost civilizations, history, kind of the middle grade version of what's the really corny movie with Nicolas Cage. I can't remember, but you probably know what I'm talking about. National Treasure. That's the movie I'm thinking of. So if we have like a middle grade version of that, except for with ancient civilizations that aren't just focused on maybe one place, I think that this is going to be really fascinating. Even if it's not all over the world, if it's just in one nation, I think that it's going to be intriguing to see how the author pulls a whole bunch of cultures together. The next recommendation comes from Kaat over at the Fairy Librarian. This was Toby Alone. This is the only book out of all of the books on this list that I can't find at my local library. So this might be one that I have to purchase, which I'm not hating the idea of. This is called Toby Alone, and it feels a little like Ferngully to me. Maybe not quite in the same scheme, but very environmental. We have a character who is only like a millimeter tall, I guess, but he's the most wanted person in the world. And I'm not exactly sure if like he's a different species, if he is a human. That's the part that I got Ferngully, because you know you have the like little fairies that are in Ferngully. And his father has discovered this tree, the great tree, that's actually living. It has a whole bunch of energy within it, but people want to use his findings to essentially make money and capitalize off of it. And his father refuses, which throws their family into a tailspin. And somehow Toby escapes, which is why he's the most wanted person in the world. I don't know. It sounds really fascinating. It sounds like it could also have a really good message, and I love stories about nature, so sign me up for this one. I just gotta find it first. Next, we have a recommendation from Amanda over at Fiction Addiction, and this was the Mystwick School of Musicraft. Yeah, the Mystwick School of Musicraft, which I like stories. I like fantasy stories that incorporate music and magic. One of my favorite YA V.E. Schwab's is The Savage Song. I think it's so fun. And I'm not even going to describe like how music is involved, but I like the concept of taking something that is very artsy and crafty and putting it into a fantasy world, because I just think that it fits. And so yeah, I think this one sounds really cute. It says, Amelia Jones always dreamed of attending the Mystwick School of Musicraft, where the world's most promising musicians learn to create magic. So when Amelia botches her audition, she thinks her dream has met an abrupt and humiliating end, until the school agrees to give her a trial period. Amelia is determined to prove herself, vowing to do whatever it takes to become a perfect musician, even if it means pretending to be someone she isn't. So I'm imagining there's going to be some type of a theme of finding oneself and loving oneself, which I always love those middle grade themes. I think they're very sweet and wholesome. And yeah, just a good message. The last recommendation that I had from you guys was from Luisana, and this recommendation is a new release. It doesn't come out until May, I don't think, and I didn't catch this in my new releases video. This is The Gate, the Girl, and the Dragon, and it's about a Chinese dragon that guards the gates. So it has a lot of Chinese folklore in it, I think. I think it's also maybe a portal fantasy, because the dragon doesn't really want to guard the gate. It thinks that it's a boring job, and instead it wants to play some type of a game. I'm not exactly sure what game it is, but in the midst of kind of avoiding his duties, he accidentally does something where he ends up having to follow like this sacred sphere that he's supposed to be watching through this portal, because he accidentally pushes the sphere through the portal and ends up in the human realm. And I'm sure he runs into a girl where they form a bond and things ensue. It reminds me a little of Mulan with Mushu and, you know, his cantankerousness and not wanting to be who he was at the beginning of that story. And so it definitely gives me a little bit of nostalgia, and I am excited about it. So I hope this one's good. Now on to the books that I found myself that I want to add to my TBR, just because I think they sound fantastic. Some of these are new releases, other ones are not. The first one is called Where the Lockwoods Grow, and I am so excited to get to this. It just sounds right up my alley. It says 12-year-old Erie has never lived life fully in the sunlight. After destructive wildfires wreaked havoc on the world around her, the government came up with a plan. Engineer a plant that cannot burn. Thus, the fire-resistant Lockwood was born. The Lockwood protects Erie and her hometown from preen, but it grows incredibly fast and must be cut back every morning. Only the town's youngest and smallest citizens can fit between the branches and tame the plant. Citizens just like Erie. So it sounds like a little bit of cli-fi. It sounds like we have like a world on the cusp of disaster and someone trying to help, but maybe by not helping. And then of course the children are the ones who suffer in the end. So I'm excited to see where the story goes. What does she do and what happens in the preen when she's in there cutting it up? Next, we have a book called The Flicker. This is another one. Middle grade covers are just the best, aren't they? I love the color schemes that people choose for these books. I like this cover as well. This says this is a middle grade debut, and it offers a bittersweet tale of hope, survival, a modern classic for climate change. So once again, we have that cli-fi type of story. This says 1 year ago, a solar flare scorched the earth and destroyed life as we knew it. With their parents gone and supplies running dangerously low, stepsisters Millie and Rose have only one chance at survival. Leave home with their their infant half-brother and loyal dog Corncob in search of Millie's grandma. As they navigate the burning land in a group of fellow survivors dodging the Hive, a villainous group that has spent the last year hoarding supplies and living in luxury, the siblings have to learn how to rely on each other more than ever and discover how to build a new life from the ashes. This isn't necessarily a found family story because they are already family at the beginning of the book, but I do think that two siblings learning how to survive together when they haven't really had to before can be a really endearing story. I love the fact that the very beginning says that this is a story of hope and survival. That's my jam. Give me a hopeful story any day of the week. Next, we have The Labyrinth of Lost and Found. This follows a young boy who is someone who is very logical, a scientific mind, if you will, and he does not believe in magic whatsoever, but he gets something in the mail one day. I think it's a doll, and this turns into a bird. And the bird ends up leading him through, I think it's a portal fantasy, so I think it leads him through a portal into a world of fantastical elements. And he, along the way, meets a young girl who is searching for her missing brother, and they have to figure out how to navigate this magical world together, and I'm assuming also how to get back home. I love certain types of portal fantasy. Sometimes when portal fantasy is mixed with urban fantasy, it's really not my jam. It depends on how it's done, but I do like the aspect of someone from our world getting pulled into a fantasy world and having to figure it out, especially a kid. I feel like for whatever reason, I like those stories more because I think that it's more believable that a kid, I guess, would travel into a fantasy world and not just completely shut down and be like, okay, I got to figure out what to do, because they already have, you know, some creative and imaginative. I feel like a kid could believe that something is real, whereas an adult, I think, would just be like, I'm seeing things. But maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, I think this one sounds interesting. The next one is a book called Scritch Scratch, which is a middle grade horror. And the little like first paragraph of the synopsis says this is a ghost story about a malevolent spirit, an unlucky girl, and a haunting mystery that will tie the two together. She is another one who has absolutely no interest in paranormal magic. She doesn't believe in any of it. She's very logical, kind of like the last book. And she sees a boy on the bus on her way home, and he disappears. But then she starts seeing him other places. So that's all I kind of know about it. I haven't read farther into the story just because I think it sounds intriguing. Once again, I love when you have someone who is very much grounded in the real world having to be pulled into a paranormal realm or a fantasy realm. I'll take either one. I think it's going to be a fun time. The next one is also one I would consider maybe middle grade horror. We'll see how dark it ends up getting. I'm intrigued though. This is called The Mirrorwood, and it features a girl who has some type of a curse. She does not have her own face, and in order to survive, she has to go around and steal other people's faces. And there are people out in the world that will hunt individuals like her so her curse doesn't spread. And you guys have to hear about how the story progresses. It says, appearances are always deceiving. Fable has been cursed by what the people in her village called the Blight, a twisted enchantment that leaves her without a face of her own. To stay alive, Fable has to steal the faces of others, making her an outcast that no one trusts. When the fierce Blight hunter comes to kill Fable and stop her curse from spreading, Fable narrowly escapes by fleeing into the thorny woods surrounding her small village. So maybe we have a little bit of a reluctant villain, I guess, character, maybe a villain origin story, but it gets interesting. It says the treacherous forest has been ruled by the demon prince for centuries, a deadly place trapped in time. Fable and her opinionated feline companion, which gotta love a cat, his name is Moth, is the first to dare to enter in a very long time. There she encounters a tediously chatty skull, dangerously meddlesome deities, and a beast so powerful it tears the fabric of reality, leaving nothingness in its horrible wake. I think it almost sounds like the Goblin Market. Like it sounds like she goes in and she finds this world that has all these different things. I don't know. This book excites me. I don't know what about it makes me want to jump in right now, but I think it sounds fantastic. This next TBR pick is an author pick. Heather Fawcett. I knew that Heather Fawcett had written middle grade prior to writing Emily Wilds, but I've never read any of them, and I'm excited to start. This one is called The Language of Ghosts, and it sounds adorable. And I don't know why I haven't read more of Heather Fawcett's work up until now. This says, forced into exile on an enchanted moving island, ex-princess Noah has two missions: reclaim her family's stolen throne and ensure the dark powers her older brother Julian possesses don't go to his head in the process. But between babysitting her annoying little sister Mite and keeping an eye on the cake-loving sea monster that guards the moving island, Noah has her hands full. A cake-loving sea monster? Are you kidding? Yes, sign me up for this right now. I need to go out and buy a copy before I've even started it. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna see if I can get it from my library first. But I mean, Heather Fawcett hasn't disappointed me with Emily Wilds, so I'm excited to see what type of middle grade world that she builds. The last book on my list is The Troubled Girls of Dragomir Academy. And this one's been on my list for a while. I can't remember who recommended it to me originally, so if you were the recommender, please let me know and I'll add you in the credits down below. But this one is about a magical school. It does have monsters in it as well. I'm not sure exactly in what context, but it is set in a world where you have two siblings. You have a daughter and a son, and the son is thought to be like his parents are essentially preparing him for being like a great sorcerer. And the daughter doesn't seem to be able to do anything right, and so she's kind of always left on the outskirts of the family. And somehow when the people who come to test her brother for magical skills, something happens and she ends up getting an invitation to a magical school for girls. And so she gets whisked away to this magical school and has to figure out how to live in a world that she never anticipated, because she wasn't brought up to be someone who would be ever magical. And I'm excited to see a magical school for one, which I don't always like, but I think I like them more in middle grade than I like them in anything else. I don't know why. I feel like it's a little bit cozier in middle grade. I don't have to worry about like the angst, I guess, that comes along with school because it's middle grade. I guess sometimes you have to worry about it, but not quite as often. And I like this concept of someone who is not expected to ever be something or grow into a power that no one expects. I like those storylines for people to have to kind of overcome these obstacles of the expectation of them not being great. And I know that it's not like an uncommon trope by any means. I think that it's actually a very common thing, but I like seeing people redefine themselves, I guess. So them have a set identity at the beginning of the book where they feel a certain way and feel they're going to end up in a certain place. And they have to realize and deal with that in their head, kind of work through who they are as a person as the book goes. I like that because I'm a character-driven reader, so it doesn't surprise me at all that those types of stories get me. So those are the 15 middle grade books that I would like to get to. I'm not gonna set like an end date for this. I just really wanted this to be a place where I can keep the middle grade to kind of come back to and pull from the pile every once in a while. If you guys have recommendations that you want to give, please, please, please leave them in the description down below. I would love to have more and more middle grade to add to my list, just to kind of have a pool. Perhaps I'll do like a middle grade vlog at some point in time and just pick up a couple of them at a time. Or I'll just, sporadically choose one throughout each month, the ones that tickle my fancy in the moment. But yeah, I'm really excited about this. So there were lots of like magical forests and things like that, climate, in the books that I talked about today. And so if you aren't feeling chatty, just leave some type of forestry down in the comments, whether or not it's trees, an animal that you find in the forest, whatever you want to leave a little emoji for me so I know that you're here with me. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.